Good morning, everyone. Bit late to record the review, but honestly, I just was busy doing honestly nothing. I was busy doing nothing. I was just hanging out on my phone, to be honest. Anyways, the pivot is finally gonna hit. I told you guys that I am bullish for 20,199.5 to hit sometime today, and it did finally hit. I'm not trading, as you guys know. I only trade for roughly the first hour, oftentimes just the first like 30 minutes. But looks like we still have a few people in the server that are in calls for this or longs and key longs. But yeah, we are in super heavy supply. But I mean, you're going to be in supply when you're in an uptrend. And given the uptrend, this is pretty much the only pivot. So I'm going to go over this morning's trading. This was the worst price action morning that we've had in probably roughly 2-3 weeks. It wasn't terrible though. It's just been the worst in a few weeks because we have been absolutely kicking ass every single morning. Every morning was a bright green morning, not hard at all. Yesterday's was a little harder because I had 3 losses. One of those were half size, but then I had 5 wins, and all the wins were bigger than losses, so it wasn't actually difficult. This morning, that was not the case. But yeah, very bullish for this pivot. And it kind of started with the pre-market analysis. Here it was at pre-market. You can see that we are in heavy supply, which for those of you using the indicator, you can't see it because TradingView only goes like, for me, 20,000 candles back. This supply formed more than 20,000 1-minute candles ago. But this is what I was working with. Now, I was it was interesting because at the very end of market open yesterday, we completely plummeted. And then all of a sudden overnight, we shoot right back up. And now here we are way back up. Hell, we swept yesterday's high here. So it's hard not to be bullish because, if we had that big of a pullback, but we invalidated it in the fashion that we did, looks like the market's bullish. It really does. So we have a couple of pivots. Here's one here. There are none on ES at the moment. If I go back on the 15-minute, there's nothing. Just straight up and down. It's kind of hard to see because supply, but there's nothing. NQ. The most major one is right here. There is one right here that we already swept. And then there's a tiny one right here. I didn't mark this one out. This one, it wasn't a big deal to me. So pretty much my pre-market analysis is, we're in heavy supply, possibly just put in a bearish liquidity sweep, so it could drop. But if we invalidate this drop, this pullback that we've had, I have to be in calls because, it's in an uptrend. We have a pivot ahead, above, all those things. So that's where I was at. And as you guys know, as long as pivots are swept in the morning, I make money. But one out of every, what would you guys say, 8 mornings maybe, you don't sweep a pivot within the first hour. I'm going to be red every time. That's just part of trading, right? As long as the odds are in your favor, as long as it happens less than 50% of the time, who cares, right? So, again, you can't see the supply because we're on the 1-minute time frame and it formed too long ago. But the market opened and it did nothing right at open. Let's see when I got in. You can immediately see that ES is stronger than NQ. That's a big deal. And here we are shooting up on ES. My only thing is maybe I entered calls a little early. But again, I've pretty much done the same thing this entire week. And I've been making money this entire week. So I'm going to mark out that. I already marked out this pivot, mark out this one as well. So I entered SPX calls here pretty much at the close of this candle. Just looking for this high. A little hesitant though. I did want to go half size and save room to add, but then I'm like, I don't really want to do that because if it is in fact a bearish liquidity sweep here like we talked about, it's going to dump pretty hard and I'm just going to take a bigger loss. So I'd rather just have a tight stop loss and 1.2 risk reward trade to the pre-market high. That's what I'd rather see. It was going well. It was a solid green candle. Then it turned into a huge selling wick. That sucks. Same thing again, was a super solid green candle that just turned into a selling wick twice in a row. You don't usually see that at market open. I mean, it's 4 minutes after market open now. 3 minutes, only 3 minutes after market open. And you don't see that. So that was kind of my first red flag of, that's weird. If this next candle opens, red's probably going to stop out, which is fine. It is what it is. This trade was still, pretty solid. If this, if I didn't enter and this selling wick didn't end up forming, I would have missed this trade. So I ended up stopping out of this, not quite yet, right when the buying wick invalidated. And I said that in my channel. You guys have to pay attention to my channel if you're trading alongside me, because I'll say, well, right here I said, that's a big rejection, because I said QQQ calls look a little bit better. I was thinking about getting in some as well, but then I'm rejected. I said, if we invalidate this rejection fully, I'll add QQQ calls. Otherwise, it looks like I'm going to stop loss. So my stop loss was, let me see exactly where it was. It was right here. My stop losses are fairly hard. However, if it just barely touches it and then puts in a buying wick, that's not enough to trigger me. But once it puts in a large buying wick, which is a potential reversal candle, the second that buying wick invalidates, that's when I stop out. That was kind of a theme today. That happened 2 or 3 times today. So right when the buying wick invalidated, I stopped out. Didn't get the best fill that I wanted, but I got 2.2. So that was my first trade, minus 20%. Good trade, nothing wrong with it. It just ended up rejecting. So I'm like, okay, well, that's a pretty steep drop. The problem is I have 0 pivots to the downside. The only thing I have somewhat near is demand. But, it's not looking like bullish consolidation at the moment. I say I can enter puts only if we bearishly consolidate, right? First leg consolidation, second leg, that's typically how the market runs. So if we can consolidate, then I can enter puts. Otherwise, I can't really just enter puts at low of day. There's not a good hypothesis behind that. So I said, okay, if this bounce invalidates, I'll be in puts, right? That'll be enough. It didn't invalidate, and here we go again. I got to get back into calls. Now, it was interesting because NQ dropped more than ES, but it also bounced harder than ES. It still looks like ES is a little stronger, but NQ is fully back above this candle right here, 6:36 my time. ES is not. So now this is looking a lot more bullish because now, it's the same trade over again, except you add a bullish liquidity sweep. And that was a really hard drop. And the fact that almost all of it invalidated, that's pretty bullish. So I end up going half size on both because I don't know which one's going to be stronger. I don't know which is going to be weaker. I can just roll the dice and hop in SPX calls full size because it was stronger. But I'm glad I didn't do that because it would have been worse off. It actually would have been pretty much the same, but ES ended up flipping weaker. But obviously I don't know that. So what I do is I'll, say I put $2,000 per trade on average. No, like if I do roughly $2,500 to $3,000 per trade, I'll just put, $1,300 in SPX, $1,300 in QQQ. And it's always like a give or take. Now, I was a little bit heavier in QQQ. I actually filled the QQQ calls right after the SPX calls, and I filled as this right when this candle closed. So I got a slightly higher average in QQQ, but you can see immediately from the candle open, I did end up filling more QQQ calls. So I was roughly like a little, if you combine both positions dollar-wise, I was a little bit heavier than one full-size position, like 1.2x is what I think I said in my channel. Just a couple contracts over, which is not bad at all. And immediately you can see it looks like NQ is now stronger than ES. And for the first time today, we have a major divergence in strength. Huge green candle on NQ, small red candle on ES. That doesn't look good. So pretty much from the get-go, unless the next candle is green, which it almost was on ES, it was a little green, but by this candle I kind of knew I was going to stop out, at least on SPX. NQ really looked like it wanted to go up. It really did, but just ES was dragging its feet. So that was unfortunate. Again, it looks like NQ is having an inverse head and shoulders. It looks good to go up, but ES is dragging its feet. It's just not looking good. So NQ so close to going up. And finally, I'm able to draw a good trend line. I actually draw these trend lines on both ES and NQ because now clearly we are bullishly consolidating. We have lower lows and lower highs, and after each lower low, we are bouncing hard, right? Not as much on ES, but this is clearly a descending Browning wedge. So now I'm stuck. I can't go short anymore. I can't buy puts anymore because I am stuck with this bullish bias, which means, and I say this in my channel, if we keep chopping down, I will not have a single green trade this morning. I have to pretty much only get in calls unless we do something like this on like ES or something. We go up here, we sweep it, come down, I stop out early, then I can potentially take puts if it consolidates to the low. I cannot enter puts with a major lack of sell side liquidity sweeps, aka higher highs. If we have no higher highs whatsoever and we are only chopping down, it is like 80-ish% of the time a matter of time before you break to the upside. Anything puts related or short related is not probabilistically favorable, right? So I can't do it. I can only get in calls. So this is setting up to potentially just be a bright red morning, which is due. I mean, the last 2 weeks of options trading, I was gone last week, but the week before that, pretty much every single day has been bright green, especially this week. Every single day has been so bright green, so beautiful. It was kind of due, but it is what it is. You know, I trade the same way every morning as you all do, and it's just a roll of the dice. You just have to be willing to accept your outcomes. Anyways, I stopped out about halfway through this candle. I stopped out when the buying week invalidated. Same thing. And so I sold that at minus 30%. Now keep in mind, each of these trades are roughly half size. I was half size on SPX and roughly like 2/3 size on QQQ calls. So it looks like I'm taking 2 losses back to back or 2 losses in a row. I'm not. It's just pretty much one hypothesis. But anyways, I believe I moved my stop loss for the NASDAQ calls. We're pretty much up here. I gave ES a chance to sweep. Put in a huge buying wick. I'm like, all right, if this buying wick invalidates, I'm out. And I sold on this candle. So I didn't really want to, but I sold for minus 33%. No, I didn't sell on this candle. I started selling on this candle. 2 of my contracts filled, and then I pulled the plug because it did invalidate the buying wick, but it kind of went back up. I'm like, okay, I'll save the rest, I guess. It actually started bouncing. Here's where I sold the rest. I actually got hopeful here. I'm like, okay, well, you know, ES has made lower lows again. Look how much stronger NQ is than ES. Look how hard it's popping to the upside in comparison to ES's green candle. Looks great. And then this candle happened, and I stopped out immediately. So I filled that for minus 33%. So between both the trades, it's like I lost a 1.2x trade for minus 30%. So really on the day, it's 3 trades, so 3 losses, but size-wise is 2 losses. And by what I mean by that, 2 attempts. I've made 2 attempts at an upside break. Well, now it's interesting because ES and NQ are worlds apart. NQ looks like a bull flag. NQ looks bullish. You know, it's still a strong uptrend. ES, though, does not. And finally, ES has kind of broken hard enough to the downside where it's not really in the descending Browning wedge anymore. It's barely in, but now it's invalidated, you know, more than half of the entire upside that happened this morning. You're never going to have bullish consolidation that invalidates half of it. So now I'm starting to actually kind of flip bearish. However, this trend line is freaking beautiful on NQ, and I say that in my channel. It is beautiful, very likely to break to the upside, but what I'm thinking is ES may drop to demand. So I'm trying to look for an excuse to get into SPX puts. Can't be here, because finally we just swept a lower low on NQ, and we're having volume spikes, which is an indication of reversal. And a spoiler alert, it does reverse. Also, the buying wick is beautiful. We reverse again. I'm like, oh, it's actually reversing hard. I may have to enter calls again. And there's a problem with that because I thought, yeah, ES can bounce, but is it really going to bounce all the way up here? I think it's more likely that it does something like this. But, you know, if I get like 2 more solid green candles, I'm going to have to get in. Okay, now I'm really going to have to get in. It's clear that I'm not going to split it up half size. I'm just going to enter QQQ calls. I'm going to go a little bit heavier though, because this pattern looks freaking beautiful. It is, and again, you're not allowed to go heavier unless you're willing to take a heavier stop loss. I don't care about my daily P&L at all. So if you do, you can't do it. You gotta keep your positions the same size. But now we have beautiful buy-side liquidity sweeps. The trend line above is freaking glorious. Every single bounce has a ton of momentum behind it, and it's stronger than ES. It looks beautiful. So I filled my calls here. Full size, a little bit bigger than full size. A little bit bigger than full size. Pretty much the same size as the last two trades combined, right? And the last two trades combined were like 1.2x. Anyways, yeah, I'm at least going for the pre-market high. We immediately start dropping. I'm like, yep, here we go. I mean, I had a feeling that ES was going to do that. But at the same time, NQ is a possible inverse head and shoulders, which you can see here. It's not very bullish that it didn't at least get to this trend line before it dropped. If it got to this trend line before it dropped, it would be very bullish. Like, I'd be confident the whole way down. 90% chance it just does this. But right now, it didn't make the trend line reverse right after I got in. It's not looking good. I think I'm going to stop out and just call it a day after that. But it didn't. NQ flipped weaker here. It didn't last. And then we actually break to the upside. I did say right here that if we get to the trend line, I'm actually going to average up on this trade. Again, it's not often that I increase my size. I did once yesterday, and that was the first time in a few weeks. But I said I'm actually going to average up and bring this position to roughly a 2x leverage position. But only if we get to the trend line. That's it. And if we get to the trend line, don't immediately reject it, then I'll average up. Again, that's not a formal alert. I don't formally alert average ups unless it's specifically part of the plan. Like I go in half size and I either average down or average up after I get in. But that wasn't the case. So it was an informal alert, just telling you guys what I was doing. And not necessarily so you guys can follow, but just so you guys can gauge my confidence, if that makes sense. So I average up here. I'm glad I did. I entered initially at 64 cents. They dropped to like 54, 55. They dropped somewhere in the low 50s. I don't know. And then I was hoping that I would get in at like, my average up would be at like 65. I filled at 69 cents, so not a great average up. Or it was an average up. I was kind of hoping it'd be the same price. But we did break to the upside, and I am looking for the pre-market high. But now ES has somehow made it all the way back up to the trend line, so now I have to reconsider the descending broadening wedge, which formed this morning. Which means technically my PT is the pre-market high on ES. And I still have this price target here, this pivot, even though I have to cut through very heavy supply. It's feasible because the trend's been so strong. So, anyways, it's looking fairly bullish at the moment. But the second NQ gets to the pre-market high, I am trimming mostly all of it. NQ flipped weaker than ES, which made it very easy to dump my contracts the second this hit, and I did, and it was beautiful. So from the initial alert, I got 90 cents. 90 cents is my sell, and it's for 40%. Again, because I averaged up, I had a smaller percent gain, but I made more money. And that actually nearly brought me to it pretty much did bring me to break even on the day. Like, I did see my P&L actually flip green for the day there, only because I averaged up. If you didn't average up, you're down by you should be down by a little less than one red trade. Like maybe one more 15% green trade, 10 to 15% you'll be there. But I held a small position for the next high, and the contracts really, really, really started to chop here, so that was bad. But I'm also very bullish for ES to get to the pre-market high. Very bullish for ES to get to the pre-market high. It ended up falling, so I dumped the rest here, and then I was back to being like slightly red on the day. Like one 10% trade would flip me green on the day. Really, I would only need like 5%. But because that small position didn't make it, and I ended up selling that small position pretty much at break even because the contract's chopped. I was still very small red on the day. I was going to call it there, started typing it out, but I did tell you guys what's my exact wording. I said NQ missed the PT, and ES missed the pre-market high, which is this blue line here. But it is 99.999% likely to hit today. So I finished pretty small red on the day. But I'm pretty happy with the results today because I actually got the breakout. It could have been a way worse day today. The breakout could have never come and I would have been stuck re-entering the same trade. Again, I pretty much, it's not like a hard written rule, but I pretty much have a 3 strikes and you're out. So that was truly my last attempt on the breakout. If I would have lost, would have just called it a day, as clearly price action isn't favorable today, and come back on Monday, which would have sucked to end the week on a very negative note. Luckily, ended on a positive note. But as I'm typing that and as my thinkorswim is still open, ES starts invalidating the drop. I'm like, all right, I can't resist. And I told you guys I got in. I didn't formally alert it or anything because I was done alerting. But anyways, I'm like, all right, I'll go for one trade. You know, small trade, 1-to-1 risk reward, pretty much. I'm just looking for the pre-market high on ES. If it hits, I'll be green on the day. If it stops out, I'll be red on the day by only 1 green trade instead of a fraction of a green trade. I'm willing to risk it. It's a, like I said, 99.99% chance it looks like this is going to be it. And it was it. So I sold. Unfortunately, I sold on this candle here, right at the high of this candle, for 3.3 from 2.7 to 3.3 for 22% gain. So I was actually green on the day by roughly like 110% trade, which is pretty cool. It did end up continuing though. I didn't get any of it. It got to like 3.7 and the NQ calls, or just NQ, got much closer to the pivot. But I was done here. So I actually finished green on the day, which is beautiful. But looking back, you know, there could be an argument to be said about this one. Like, yeah, I could have waited for one more candle, but you also have to keep in mind I'm in supply right now. And entering calls this close to the pivot is a terrible risk to reward trade. Oops, that was the wrong direction. It's terrible risk to reward. And it's not like you can expect it to go much higher than that because we're also in very heavy supply. So it was a pretty tough decision, but I stand by it. So pretty much every trade was, you know, perfect. Calls right here, going for pre-market high, didn't work, fine. Calls right here, beautiful trade, green to red on NQ, just red on ES because it was too weak. Good. Avoided puts, which was good. I would have lost on puts here. I would have lost on puts here. And then one more attempt here for the calls, which was, again, a flawless trade. So, and then this bonus one here that formally flipped me green on the day. So every single trade was flawless according to my TA and my strategy. And people that don't know how to trade can't comprehend that. They think when you take, you know, if you're watching an analyst and they take 2 or 3 losses in a row, they think the world's ending. While it may be ending for other analysts, you have to understand the law of probabilities, right? If you flip a quarter 1,000 times, yes, 50% of the time it's going to land on, you know, over the 1,000 flips, it's going to be pretty damn close to 500 heads, 500 tails. That doesn't mean it's not going to land on tails 10 times in a row. It's just a luck of the draw, right? But anyways, that was my morning. Very happy with it. And if we go out, you see that NQ still barely misses PT. It's due to hit, but I will say this looks like a perfect trend line. Look at this demand retest on ES. Oh yeah, no, it looks good to go here. I mean, this is another huge flag. This flag is way too big. It's not proportional. It's way too big for this run. Not too big size-wise, but length-wise. But that is a perfect trend line on ES. Very likely to break. It may pull back one more time for an inverse head and shoulders, which would make sense because it looks like one. But it looks good for at least a new high of day, maybe like here. And that should push NQ to the pivot. Looks good to get there. But again, I mean, it kind of makes sense that's acting like this because we are in very heavy, we're in 4 heavy supply zones at the moment. And NQ is in 3 supply zones. Makes sense why it's having such a hard time. But with that being said, does anyone have any questions regarding any of the trades that were taken this morning? Questions? Everyone's good? All right, sweet. So I will download this video, or I should say upload this video to YouTube. And yeah, great morning. Just executing my strategy, taking the trades that I am supposed to take and not taking the ones that I'm not supposed to take. And thought I was going to finish red on the day. Luckily, I didn't. but it was great. This week was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic week. And if you guys didn't watch yesterday's review, by the way, watch it because it was loaded with good content. But anyways, all right. I will. By the way, I have a meeting today at 10 my time, and as you guys know, I start my live futures trading at 10:30, so I may be a little late to live futures trading. So I'll keep you guys updated on that. But I'll see you guys around that time. So enjoy your day. Good luck if you continue to trade, and I'll see you guys in voice for some live futures trading. And if you are in NQ longs or QQQ calls looking for this PT, looks like it's finally going to get there. So congrats on that win. Knock on wood. I don't want to jinx you. But all right, I'll see you guys later.